Brizzy.
Brizzy.
Nickname for Brizzy has to be Brizzy.
Well, we used to always call it Bris Vegas.
Oh, it's got to be Brizzy.
So the nickname that I give Brisbane is mainly Brizzy or Bris Vegas.
Look, probably some of my experience at World Expo, having the contract to do the hair for the different events, the River Stage and at the concert hall. I can remember a Royal Command performance that with many stars,
Wow.
John Denver, Donny Osmond. Look, the list was enormous, but I can remember Donny Osmond coming straight from his room at the Crest Hotel, immaculately dressed in Carnaby leather, not a hair out of place, and I was determined to do his hair. And I said, you can't go on with hair like that. So I just grabbed a water spray and just basically combed it exactly the same way, and he was just over the moon and thought I was a miracle worker. But I remember that was one pretty funny experience. John Denver arriving backstage, running late with wet hair, and they were literally calling him onto the stage when he was with me in the hair section. And we both looked at each other, panicked, and he said, quick, hand me a can of hairspray. And we ran together along or across the backstage area, and he passed me the hairspray after dousing himself. And then it was like a baton relay where he passed the hairspray back to me. And he then walked out on stage just as a gust of wind on the river stage blew one side of his hair up. And if anyone knows what wet hair and hairspray do, his hair, he looked like he was out of that group, the Flock of Seagulls. And one side of his hair was permanently blown up through the whole performance. That was, I'll never forget that. We had some world dancers, world-class dancers doing a Spanish flamenco, and this event was being telecast on Channel 7 live, and I hadn't pinned in a large rosette into the hair as firmly as I would have liked. And I can remember this dancer spinning towards the television camera, and the rosette just kept going and went straight into the lens. That was horrifying. So yeah, lots of fun things like, you know, little experiences like that, and working with Dame Edna, doing the hair, doing the wigs for Barry Humphries, and creating the Celeste character, and yeah, Edna was bigger than life. Yeah.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Weird, probably more fun, was we used to ski on the Brisbane River, and as a teenager, a mate of mine had a little tinny, and we had our surfboards, and we'd tow each other up and down the Brisbane River and align it when the gravel barges would come up and down the river, because back then the gravel barges supplied gravels to the concrete works at South Brisbane. And these big barges would throw up a wake that was like a metre high wake behind them, and we'd come in with the tinnies and being towed in on the surfboards and surf and follow them up the river. Then later on, late teens, early 20s, we were able to go and buy a ski boat, and we used to ski on the river.
When I was younger, I was walking around the botanical gardens with my grandparents, and a duck made me fall into the pond. My grandma had to come and save me.
Definitely the swimming pools, because that's just what you do as a kid.
I would say probably the swimming pools, just because I always used to swim there as a kid.
Do you ever pee in there?
I don't know. Maybe, probably.
Probably the kiddie pools. I remember going there a lot with my grandparents when I was younger. Yeah, probably kiddie pools.
My dad and I used to do a lot of like walking up from where all the Navy ships and boats are, and then going all the way down to QPAC, and then going back and doing that a few times along the river.
The nostalgia would be, let me think. Probably some of the statues. And I'm not sure if it's still there, but it's like a big Javanese building. The Stefan Tower.
Oh, the Needle.
The Needle would probably be the most iconic, or the one that we all still see. Yeah.
That's down in West End.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, that would have to be the lagoon area, because that's where I used to go with Brandy and Grandad and the girls when they were very young. They didn't learn to swim there. They had swimming classes, but they had their joyful swimming there. It was lovely to have that memory of Grandad helping them.
Look, for me it's probably the pool, the lagoon pool, and that, because that's where I spent so much time, post-expo with the family, the kids growing up. It's just a wonderful place.
Probably the water pools and the swimming area would be the best part.
It's not actually part of the parkland itself, but the city cat. For me, because coming in and out of the city in South Bank, when I was a kid, we always took the city cat from out at Gatton Park or out at the university.
The 600. It will be the biggest event of Australia's bicentennial. It will be the major attraction in the world next year. It is the $600 million World Expo 88 in Brisbane. For 6 stunning months, you'll be able to experience the world's best ideas, inventions, entertainment. Together we'll show the world. You'll marvel at the amazing new world in each pavilion. 40 countries, including the US, Russia, China, Japan, Australia, are waiting to dazzle you at every turn. You'll thrill to entertainment from every corner of the world. You'll gasp at the world's most daring acts on water and the world's most modern fun park. For day after day, for night after night, you'll want to return again and again to experience everything World Expo 88 has to offer. And Queensland is ready to accommodate you and your family in Brisbane or on the Gold or Sunshine Coasts. Book now for this once-in-a-lifetime experience, World Expo 88. Buy your tickets now and save. 3-day passes, $40 adults, $26 children and pensioners. You could win a Qantas family holiday at World Expo 88, April 30 to October 30. World Expo 88.
The biggest thing since Expo, and celebrations are just as big. Thousands and thousands poured in to take part in the grand opening of the new recreational park in the heart of the city. It used to be the home to World Expo, but with $105 million, it's been transformed to a massive tropical playground.
Certainly in Australia there is nothing like South Bank, something where we can capture the heart of Queensland, sunshine, the beach that we have here.
Sounds like PR talk, but they're not kidding when they say you'll find everything Queensland's famous for here. There's palm trees, of course, flora and waterfalls, a rainforest sanctuary, and even a beach. With 16 hectares to see, those who get tired of walking can hop on a boat to get around. And it seems the redevelopers have hit on a winning formula.
Excellent. It's just somewhere good you can come on a weekend or whatever and just have a picnic.
But it should also help Brisbane compete more successfully for a cut of the tourist dollar. Most of the tourists that come to Queensland end up getting off the plane and heading straight for Cairns or the Gold Coast. The government management's hoping that this new leisure showcase will give people that extra reason to stay in Brisbane, even if it's just for a couple of days. As well as entertainment venues, the park has numerous displays, including a butterfly enclosure. And there's the world's first permanent environment display, appealing to the senses.
In every area we have sound, we have light, people can touch things and feel things. And in that way they learn all about the environmental issues that we're talking about today.
While it's not quite as big as Expo 88, the benefits should last longer.
People from interstate and overseas will be able to come here and put Brisbane on the map.
You can't really compare to Expo. Expo is a one-all, but realistically, Brisbane, Queensland, has got this forever, we hope.
Nostalgia, funnily enough, is the Plough Inn, the old pub there. Yeah.
So we're talking Expo 88?
Expo 88, good memories there. Yeah.
So apart from the Plough Inn, did you ever do the beer?
We did the beer fest, we did the German pavilion, we did lots of pavilions. So sometimes it was just a Friday afternoon going into Friday night, other times it was the weekends. Anytime we had a season pass, so yes, friends, family, gatherings, it was wonderful at Expo 88.
And I imagine you did the Kiwi pavilion?
Of course.
I think nothing really gets better than your first one, because it's always that first memory, but that was Ed Sheeran at River Stage. Yeah, so
Well, that was a good one to have as your first.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I don't think you can really get any better. And it was right before he got too popular, so there wasn't as many people.
So I've only been to one concert in Brisbane, and that was Five Sauce at River Stage.
I think the best concert I've ever been to in Brisbane was Halsey, which was at Garden Point, and I went with a bunch of friends. It was like the first concert that I'd ever been to without parental guidance, so it was cool. We went straight after school and got ready together.
Look, there's a number that come to mind. Outdoor concerts, stadium concerts are very different to the Brisbane Entertainment Centre, Festival Hall, etc. Outdoor concerts, the stadium concerts, for me it was Madonna. That was, being a big Madonna fan, that was very nostalgic. You know, that was a big thing for me, and I look back very fondly of that event. Indoor concerts, there'd be a few. Prince was just an amazing event. The Eurythmics I saw every time they came, probably 5 times they came to Brisbane. That was just raw, or just the simplicity of their show was just fantastic. Belinda Carlisle, I did the hair for her for that night, for that concert. That was quite special, and the same with the B-52s, looking after the hair.
Wow, that would have been an interesting wigs, or were they wigs that you had to style?
Pieces, hair pieces, yeah. But that hair was pretty close to God.
Oh wow. Well, Festival Hall, which doesn't exist anymore, because in Brisbane we like to get rid of our heritage quite regularly. You know, something like a heritage building being knocked down in Brisbane. So anyway, when I was growing up in the 80s, I saw probably the best concert I've ever seen from a showmanship perspective was Boy George and Culture Club. Then there was Duran Duran, Bandar Ballet, oh my gosh, then ANZ Stadium, Dire Straits, Queen. Queen was awesome. And that was a one-off. Billy Joel at Festival Hall. I mean, there's so many. I suppose if I had to pick one though, it would have to be, well, Elements. Duran Duran actually had this huge wave effect, and it was like a wave was actually coming right out over to the audience. First time I'd ever seen anything like that. It was amazing. It was like a humongous hologram. This is 85, so I don't know how festival that up. But Boy George was probably the most entertaining.
Best concert has to be Sir Elton John, and that was at Lane Park, now named Suncorp Stadium.
So I'm not actually a big music or concert person, but I started with a new events management business, and my first gig was working the One Direction concert at Suncorp Stadium. So I had a little stall up front, and then once everyone had gone inside and ready for the show, they said, go, be free, find a seat and watch the show and be back 10 minutes before it ended. So I guess technically it's One Direction, and I got paid to watch the whole thing.
Well, I've got a couple. It was the place I went on my first date, and then later, a year later, for my first anniversary. So a lot of fun memories there. I think I fell off the tree a couple times. That was pretty good, and an ice cream stand that's always there. It's a pretty good place.
Look, New Farm Park was a location that my brother and I chose for my parents' silver wedding anniversary, and I had a friend who was a professional photographer, and I arranged for her to meet my brother and I there one day, and for her to photograph he and I playing in the park, climbing the trees, just basically hanging out. She had a very large lens on her camera. We weren't even aware that she was there. We just basically forgot that she was there. but she was able to capture some amazing, very spontaneous photographs, which we later blew up in black and white and put into a silver album for their 25th wedding anniversary.
So you gave the gift of youth.
Absolutely.
Oh, first, second, third birthday parties near the playground, having to lift humongous cakes up for, basically, it wouldn't just be a party, it would be every family member and their family members would come. We'd set up near the large tree, and the kids would climb over that and the playground equipment, and we'd all sit around and enjoy wine and Chardonnay. It was a Chardonnay lunch. I've done a lot of filming in New Farm, and I've also done a lot of picnicking in New Farm over the years. And of course there's the powerhouse, which used to be the old electricity station for trams in Brisbane, which is now a new arts complex. So I've seen a lot of productions at the powerhouse too.
For me, I mean, we've had lots of family events over the years, but a really memorable one was my parents were married on the 1st of October 1960. In 1985 they celebrated their 25-year anniversary, and for that my brother and I went to New Farm Park, and he had a friend who was a professional photographer, and we went all around the park, down to the river, to the big tree, the playground areas, and she took photos of my brother and I, and we compiled a beautiful silver album for their silver wedding anniversary.
Fondest memories. Look, I love the markets at New Farm Park. I love walking through the gardens there with the roses. That would have to be my favourite. But we've also had a lot of family parties, get-togethers, so I really do treasure those memories.
Probably just going there with picnics from when I was young and little, go there with a whole bunch of friends, and we all just climb the tree and all the parklands around and play soccer and cricket and that kind of thing.
I feel like I never actually planned to go to the Lookout, but it just seems to be something at night time. If nothing else is open, you just go like, why don't we go to Mount Cootha? And so you just end up not even going outside because it might be too cold, but just parking somewhere and just jamming out to music and just having a chat. It's just a thought that just goes like, where should we go? Nothing is open. Let's go to Mount Cootha.
I think I originally had plans for New Year's Eve somewhere, and then just on a limb we started to ditch those and just went up to Mount Cootha for the to see the fireworks. Yeah.
Pretty sure every trip to Mount Cootha has been pretty spontaneous. Whether I've just picked up some takeaway food, just go to Cootha to eat it, or with some friends and we got nothing to do, go to Mount Cootha.
Would you say you end most nights there?
Yeah, pretty accurate. The designated driver usually takes us up there.
I think the most spontaneous thing I've ever done with Mount Cootha was one morning I decided that I was going to walk up Mount Cootha, and I got about halfway, and then I decided, nope, not doing that, so I turned around and went home.
You and many others.
Yeah.
Do you have any fond memories of visiting the Planetarium as a school kid?
A few times. I think the best one was I fell asleep in one of the presentations and a teacher had to wake me up halfway through.
I went through a phase where I used to just love going and walking through the botanical gardens, and particularly going to see all the new, it's constantly evolved there, and I loved going to see the new precinct. I'd love to go back actually and see it now, because it would be a lot more sort of settled. But I enjoy just putting a podcast, listening to a podcast and walking around the gardens. Yeah, I just love it.
Well, in my early years, my husband and I used to park there, but I won't say too much about that. But that was very, very topical thing for most people to do in the 80s. So probably about 10 years after that, it would be taking visitors and friends that were visiting from interstate or overseas, always go up to the summit and do the lookout. And the last few years, it's hiking.
A bit of a different take on it. It was following the floods in 2011. The Botanical Gardens at Mount Cootha were one of the points where people would come who were volunteering for the Mud Army, and I went along that weekend to volunteer for the clean-up. So as an assembly point, the gardens were one of the assembly points, and just walking in there that first morning, and literally thousands of people lining up to volunteer their services, going in and being bussed out to the various places that they'll need. It was just a remarkable event.
One day I decided I was going to hike from bottom to top. That was very strenuous, but I had a good time.
Spontaneous, I don't know about that. But it was a place where if you had nothing to do on a Friday afternoon, Saturday afternoon, whatever, we could go up to the mountain. It would just be a place to grab a coffee, go to the lookout. Yeah, it was just a place that you could hang out.
I guess when me and my friends all got our licenses, we'd all drive up to the top of the summit and hang out late at night, being all young and in our teenage years and starting to be a little bit free. So yeah, just spontaneous drives to the summit.
Do you have any fond memories of visiting the Planetarium as a school kid?
Yeah, all the time. Well, a lot of them. So we used to go, I think it was once a year, occasionally we go see it all, but what really stuck by me was the Mars rover exhibit / video that they'd show about how just all of the engineering technology behind what went into landing on the surface of Mars.
Do you think that's what led you to your current career?
It definitely piqued an interest.
I'm not sure. Like, while it's a really good place to grow up and there's all these things that other countries don't have, I always found it's like really far away from Europe and the UK, which is where I want to do most of my travel. So it's very far away from everything. But growing up wise, it was, definitely one of the best, I think.
Yes, but also if I had the choice, I'd rather grow up somewhere in Europe, just because, it's so close to everything. And
Absolutely. I came to Brisbane at an age where I was starting high school. I was fortunate enough to have a mixed early childhood where I lived all over Queensland in different locations. But coming to Brisbane as a young adult, going to high school, it really was a great place because, again, you had the facilities like great swimming pools, ice skating rinks, roller skating rinks, movies, going to the movies, and these weren't places that, or opportunities that were offered in the country areas when I was smaller. But as an adult, Brisbane has just been the most wonderful city.
I actually grew up in England, just outside of London. I came over here when I was 13. So if I had the choice to do it again, I'm not sure. I think growing up in England gave me a very different view on life, and especially on people. So I don't think I'd want to lose that. But if I were looking for something that was a bit of a more naive and safe environment to grow up as a child, then Brisbane is perfect.
I see it for two things. For work opportunity, absolutely. It's really developed into a mature, modern metropolis, where anything's possible. For a lifestyle event, probably not. I'd probably prefer, I grew up in coastal areas, in my earlier years, so I've got an affinity with, I suppose, the beach and the coast. So in retirement living, I'd probably tend to move to a more coastal, semi-rural spot just for the more relaxed lifestyle.
Yes, I think Brisbane is an excellent place to live. From around the world, I think a lot of the places are way too busy and way too hot or cold or anything, and I think the people in Brisbane are excellent. So yeah.
Probably clubbing. I don't think there's much else to do there in the valley, at least that I've seen.
Well, I really enjoy clubbing, but I think the thing that I enjoy most in the valley is the kebab shops. Frequent them a lot.
Probably just like meeting new people because everyone's there to just mingle and whatnot.
The $5 pizza slices you get after a night out are pretty great.
I remember all of it. It was seedy, underground culture, it was naughty, and our parents, we weren't supposed to go there, but we did, and it was amazing. We'd all tell each other's parents we were staying at each other's place because it would be an all-night affair, basically. You'd go somewhere to dinner first, like the Pancake Manor, and then you'd all head down to the valley. You'd start at the Wickham because they have like an 8:30, 9 o'clock drag show, and you do the drag show first, and then you would kind of go work your way around venues, and you usually finish at the beach, probably the beach, and the beach has five nightclubs in it, so basically you do 5 nightclubs in one night there before anything, and then you'd end up at Mount Cooper.
None. I'd never go to the valley in the 80s. It was basically that was where all the druggies hung out. It wasn't a regulated nightclub precinct like it is now, where it was controlled and at least a lot safer like it is now. It was an area of the city that you didn't really go into.
Clubbing. It's quite different to who you'd sit down and have a talk with. It's more, expect them to be a bit more lively. So I'd have probably, I'd have Post Malone, definitely. He's just a chill kind of guy who would be really fun to hang around. I'd have, I think I'd have Kurt Cobain as well, and probably, it's tough. I'd probably go with Lil Peep, who passed away, I think, in 2017.
So, Casanova, for obvious reasons. Ernest Hemingway, for wit and drinking ability. And then Dame Julie Andrews, because I know that she can take care of me, and I'd like to see her cut loose a little bit.
I think the first one would be the Queen, just for obvious reasons. You know, it'd be just see what she would do in the valley. The second one would probably be someone like Miley Cyrus, because that would just be one crazy night, because she's kind of a crazy person. And the third one, maybe a teacher from school, just to see what they would be like.
Oh, well, first Madonna, definitely. So Ian McKellen, I think he's as camp as tits, and he owns a gay hotel in Britain, and I think he'd be loads of fun. Graham Norton would be loads of fun. I think that would be a pretty good mix.
That would be excellent.
Yeah.
So what do you remember the most from the 1980s of the Valley?
Being a door bitch at the Terminus gay bar, and that was pretty big. And that was very early 80s. So that was, I finished school in 1980, and I was on the door 81, 82. The drag shows, you know, there were, and that was when the gay scene was, it was it was really raw, and back then there was Zulus, the Zoo, the Terminus, the Beat, the Alliance Hotel up in Spring Hill. Yeah, so we had a number of different places we could go to.
Excellent. Off the Wild, for two reasons. He's wet, but also the fact that I imagine he'd be really good to critique other people's dance moves and how they're dressed and their hair. Hedda Hopper, who was an American Gothic colonist, because you'd want to read about yourself the next day in the paper. And the guy from Top Gear, because one, you'd be travelling around in style, because they pick some really good transport, but also they're great conversationalists, so that would be my posse for the night.
Katy Perry, Chris Hemsworth and Tina Fey. The first two, nice and hot, get some good photos together, and Tina Fey's a comedian, so she'd be pretty funny.
Probably Will Ferrell, Kevin Hart, and the man himself, Jesus.
Yeah, I used to go every year as a child. It was always great. I was always a big fan of the rides, and like you end your night with a show bag. What could be better? Yeah, I think my granddad worked the strawberry stand.
Well, one of the many.
Yes.
Honestly, the free stuff.
The sample.
Yeah, the sample bags and all that kind of stuff. But also...
So you're a regular at the Dairy Pavilion then?
Definitely. Yes.
Any special memories you'd like to share about the Eka as you were growing up?
Every year I used to go with my grandfather, and we would go get up really early and park at my dad's work and get the train in, and each hour we had something planned. Like we would go, at the beginning we would go to the Woolworths Pavilion, get free food, and then go around, and for lunch go get more free food, and then get like a daggle dog or something like that, and go and watch the wood choppers, and then we would continue our day, go on a few rides, make my grandfather really sick because he gets motion sick, but he would always go on the rides with me. And then we would get the bags of sandwiches that have all the different sandwiches.
Yes, the CWA Pavilion.
Yeah.
I used to go there too.
Yeah, and then we would get them, and with our show bags we'd go sit down and watch the night entertainment, so it was always really nice to go. I think it's special because, you know, it was with my grandfather, so yeah.
Exactly.
The ring events. I love the animals. Yeah, I think definitely going to see the cattle, the horses, the grand parade. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, particularly as an adult. As a child, it would have been the sideshow alley and the show bags. But I think now I love going to see the art, the handicraft, or the produce. Yeah, so.
Decorating.
I think probably the fireworks and the compare. sort of really encouraging the children, you know, blue or red, and we'd all cheer every time the different colours came up. I remember as a family we nominated the Ferris wheel as our location if we got lost. So if we got separated, we all were to meet at the Ferris wheel. I think that happened nearly every year we went.
Oh, well, when I was younger, it used to be Ride, Sideshow Alley, and the cable, I think it's called the cable ride, from one side. I'd always start with that because then you got to see everything, so you could work out, that was kind of my plan. As I aged though, I preferred going to the pavilions and check out the cake decorating and the embroidery. And of course, now I'm a little bit older though, I love wood chop. And I just can't believe these big burly men stand on this tiny bit of wood and they chop between their legs, and it's scary, but it's exciting at the same time. I stay away from the animals, they smell. So, and the dogs show, not me. So anything that smells I stay away from, which obviously is the primary point of the show, being the Royal Queensland Show, being about cattle. But you know, I stay more to the non-smelly element of the echo. Yes, one year we won. We were actually spotlighted on TV. My daughters and I were getting off the Ferris wheel, I think, and we had our faces thrown around the media for a couple of days. They were trying to track us down, and we ended up winning, and they were quite young, so it was quite a few years ago, a DVD player, which was really an amazing gift at that time.
Well, it changed over the years because obviously as a kid, the main event as a kid, as a teenager, was Sideshow Alley, going on all the rides. That was the main thing. And then when you grow up, get mature, I suppose I really love the animals, in particular the cattle pavilions, going through all of those areas, and then later on, when your children come along, being able to take them along, when they're little, to the little kiddies rides areas, and then the food, and to show them the various animals. It's an event for all the ages.
Fireworks shows are always pretty impressive. Also the show bags are pretty cool too. I remember the show bag arenas more than anywhere else. I always enjoyed pulling my dad away to the show bags to always buy me the expensive ones. Yes, my grandma and granddad used to work at the strawberry ice cream stand.
No, I like the ring events. Bit old school, I like all the displays going through the pavilions. Back when I was a kid, they weren't show bags, they were sample bags. And so all the people there, they were actually promoting themselves. They were promoting their products by giving you samples. So the sample bags back then were so very different than they are now as show bags. Yeah, brilliant memories of the fireworks at night, the grand parade on the Wednesday People's Day. Yeah, fabulous memories.
Volunteers and business owners are busily assessing the damage and beginning the massive clean-up effort, but it will still be weeks before one of the city's main arteries, Coronation Drive, is fully open again.
The water fell quickly, revealing just how devastating these floods have been. There are literally kilometres of destruction. Coronation Drive, one of the main roads into the city, is threatening to slide into the river.
The danger is that we have a landslip around this vicinity, similar to what occurred in 1974, where the riverbank and the edge of Coronation Drive go down into the river.
With hundreds of roads still cut or closed, traffic is at a standstill. The CBD is still a virtual ghost town. Many blocks are still without power. Some employers have told people not to turn up to work. The Eagle Street Pier, Brisbane's answer to Sydney's Darling Harbour, was metres underwater.
It's been pretty substantial. There's over 1.5 foot of mud in here. The bar fridges have actually come up and floated away out of the restaurant, which we never thought would happen. 5,000 businesses were affected. Those that expected the worst on Wednesday night have been slowly moving back in. Some are relieved.
I'm very, very ecstatic, but my heart bleeds for the whole of Queensland, and I want to get out there and help everyone.
The hum of cars has been replaced with the hammer of pumps, moving the underground ocean of water out of city car parks and basements. After 2.5 years of building, the new Rio Tinto headquarters was just 2 weeks away from completion. Now it'll take a week to pump the 30,000 litres of water and mud out of its car park. The heart of the city, the Queen Street Mall, is slowly starting to beat again. Banks, shops and businesses are reopening. Others that narrowly avoided damage are doing all they can to return normality to Brisbane.
Everyone still needs their coffee and we can make it, so why not?
Energex crews have been working around the clock to restore power to 120,000 southeast Queensland homes and businesses. 30,000 homes may be without power for weeks.
As electrical contractors are able to check those homes and certify them as being safe, we'll then slowly restore power.
Public transport should be back in action on Monday and commuters will have a free ride for at least a week.
I say it's not how hard you get here, it's how quick you get back up. So at the end of the day, that's all it is. We can't change what's happened.
And Queensland will need every bit of that steely resolve. Imogen Brennan, ABC News, Brisbane.
Well, the clean-up is officially underway in Brisbane with heavy machinery and the army called in to begin clearing the city's roads. Brisbane's Lord Mayor Campbell Newman is warning residents that it could be months before the city's back to normal.
Drive through any flood-affected suburb and it's not a pretty picture. Mud is caking the roads across the city, and with most of the water gone, it was time to start getting rid of it. The Brisbane City Council is aiming to get the road system cleared as quickly as possible, and major arterials are high on the priority list.
This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. This is going to take months to do. Certainly the clean-up of these streets is going to take quite a few weeks.
400 soldiers have been called in to help the council's clean-up crews. Homeowners can't call in the National Guard, but they do have people power. In the riverside suburb of Graceville, hundreds met to organise a plan of action to clean up their homes.
We're looking at having, firstly, the steering committee. They'll be involved with administration, planning and coordination at the highest level.
Frustration is beginning to emerge as people struggle without their essential services like electricity.
In the next half hour or so, could we organise something similar for those people who are in dire straits here?
We have just experienced in our local area probably one of the worst tragedies that most of us in our lifetime will experience.
Organisers say today's meeting let residents know that they weren't alone and that grassroots support would be available in the coming weeks and months. Sporting teams are working together to clean up flood-damaged facilities.
We've got a lot of support here, so we're just getting in and getting it done.
There's many willing hands, but cleaning equipment is in demand. Hardware stores across the city are selling out.
Basically, we're running out of stuff, cleaning products. There's no gumboots left in Queensland due to the Woodford Folk Fest.
Council officers are walking the streets advising residents to dump their rubbish on footpaths, but that doesn't include perishable food. The Brisbane City Council will provide special skip bins to cope with the thousands of tonnes of spoilt food. And that's not the only health risk. Authorities are warning mosquitoes will pose a serious threat in the coming weeks.
In the clean-up, if at all possible, they need to get rid of any stagnant water in their environment.
And that will be a mammoth task. But at this stage, Brisbane's drinking water is secure. Tom Forbes, ABC News, Brisbane.
After weeks of isolation, there's a glimmer of hope for flood-stricken central Queensland. Earlier this evening, the Bruce Highway was reopened, allowing supplies to get into Rockhampton. But the task of delivering food across the state still needs a massive effort. The primary food markets in Brisbane are still underwater, and with most stores having run out of fresh fruit and vegetables, they're desperately awaiting more stock.
In the aftermath of the floods, the airlift is underway to feed Queensland. Tons of food is arriving in Townsville, with parts of the north still isolated.
If they could get camels across them where they can't get trucks, they would do it.
The mammoth relief effort has become an urgent priority after flooding wiped out the Brisbane markets. 65% of the state's fresh food is usually processed under these roofs.
Retailers across the board are reporting shortages in fresh food and vegetables.
Southern states have come to Queensland's aid, marshalling fresh fruit and non-perishable food to be sent to Queensland by whatever means possible. A supply train has left Adelaide, travelling up the centre to Tennant Creek, where its cargo of food will be loaded onto waiting trucks to travel east. A convoy is on its way from Melbourne to Cairns via a route through Bourke. Multiple cargo planes have left Sydney, also bound for Queensland's north.
Nothing approaching this sort of disaster since '74.
The major supermarket chains around the state are battling to stock the shelves, and dozens of shops remain closed.
It will be days in some cases for stores to return to normal, but in other areas and other locations based on floodwaters, it's going to in fact be a week or so.
For those that did open, there were grateful customers.
We've been very fortunate to get some milk, which was not expected at all, but you're only allowed one bottle per person.
What sort of stuff you got anyway?
Just stuff for the kids, some ice to keep the milk cold, some nappies.
But they're some of the lucky ones. Ongoing fears are held for Queensland's long-term food security. As the tragedy in the Lockyer Valley unfolds, there's acknowledgement the state's salad bowl has been destroyed.
The big effect is going to be out around Laidley, all around that area where, that's been our fruit and veggies, potatoes and all that.
Authorities are hoping food supplies to flood-affected areas will be replenished once roads reopen. And after more than a fortnight, Rockhampton is at last connected to the south by road. More than 40 Sammies were waiting laden with supplies as the Bruce Highway was opened. James Kelly, ABC News, Brisbane.
Tonight, Australia's worst flood. 9 dead. Southeast Queensland is swamped.
We do need to brace ourselves for the likelihood of further bad news.
Towns in the Lockyer Valley ripped apart by a wall of water.
Stood on the roof of that building behind me and watched the cars float down the road, watched the houses float down the road.
Flood-devastated towns on the Darling Downs bracing for the second inundation in a week.
They have not been able to prepare. It's come so fast.
And it's all heading for the capital, Brisbane, preparing for a repeat of 1974.
Today is very significant. Tomorrow is bad, and Thursday is going to be devastating for the residents and the businesses concerned.
Good evening, Joe O'Brien with a special national bulletin of ABC News from Brisbane on ABC One and across Australia on ABC News 24. Australia's worst flooding disaster. That's how the situation in Queensland is being described. 3/4 of the state is now a disaster zone. And after 19 days, the human toll has risen dramatically. 9 people were killed overnight. Nearly 60 are missing in the worst hit area of the Lockyer Valley to the west of Brisbane. The southeast Queensland farming district was hit by a wall of water as the Lockyer Creek rose in a matter of minutes, roaring through the town of Grantham. Homes were ripped from their stumps, cars swept from streets. More people were killed in floodwaters at Murphy's Creek, just to the north. Black Hawk helicopters this afternoon evacuated 300 people living at Forest Hill near Laidley. 2 lives were lost in the inland city of Toowoomba, which yesterday experienced what's being described as an inland tsunami. Police are not expecting that number to climb, but the crisis is far from over. Brisbane is being warned that a flood peak worse than the record 1974 event is likely to hit the capital in the next 48 hours. Already the suburbs of Fortitude Valley, Albion, West End and Milton are going under. People in other low-lying areas have been told to leave before they're forced out. Premier Anna Bligh was shaken last night as she revealed the extent of the crisis. Today, she described it as a true test of Queenslanders. She's called in help from interstate, but appealed for residents to hang in there.
I understand that you may be very frightened by what is happening around you. What we need now is calm.
At least 30 suburbs in Brisbane are under threat, with residents affected in 1974 being told to expect the same. Ipswich is also about to be hit hard. Mayor Paul Pizzali says 16 suburbs will be flooded, with thousands of residents affected. The Bremer River is expected to reach 22 metres tomorrow and may go higher. That's a greater flood than 1974. Well, like Darwin after Cyclone Tracy, that's how the damage to the Lockyer Valley town of Grantham is being described. Their houses were torn from their foundations and literally carried away by the raging torrent. The ABC's Paul Lockyer is the only reporter who's been able to get into the town, and he filed this report.
The images are stark. This is a battered remnants of a small Queensland town destroyed in a matter of minutes by a wall of water. The torrent that came through here swept all before it. Kel Woods and his wife clambered onto the roof of their house to try to escape the fast-flowing water.
Stood on the roof of that building behind me and watched the cars float down the road, watched the houses float down the road, watched just the massive amounts of debris.
And my house is now right up the back corner there, and you can see my kitchen and the laundry.
Leroy Shepherd points to where his house once stood.
You'd actually feel the whole house just pop up off its stumps, turn around and go for 100 and something metre cruise down my backyard.
He and his family stayed in their home as it broke up and floated away. They spent 5 hours on the roof waiting for the water to drop.
Yeah, it's not a good feeling the floorboards underneath your feet just ripple. Just the whole house ripple and crack, and just watch a room just disappear in front of your face.
Most survivors were evacuated from Grantham today to a nearby town where they're being offered accommodation and support. The most chilling aspect of this disaster is how many people may have been caught in their homes when the water came. Townspeople fleeing for their lives tell of hearing cries of anguish from several houses as a torrent consumed the town.
We were worried about this house beside the hotel, where we were at the height of it, and we just watched it implode, and just an explosion of insulation and everything. Just the velocity of the water was incredible, just took it so quickly. And we think there was 2 people in there, maybe 3, but nobody knows, no one's sure.
People are still missing here. Only when the water finally drops will the full tragedy be revealed. Paul Lockyer, ABC News, Grantham, Queensland.
And reporter Paul Lockyer has just filed this update from Grantham.
Finally, the rain has begun to ease in Grantham, and the water has actually started to drop, but what that has revealed is even more graphic damage than that which we captured this morning in the first light of day. If you look behind me here, this is a nursery that has been totally crushed by the torrent. In the middle of nursery down there is a water tank that's come from about 400 metres away. And there is, sitting in the middle of it all, is a house that's come from just over here, about 200 metres away. The damage here is just colossal. And for the town itself, well, most of the people now have been evacuated. There's nowhere to live here for the moment, and there's no support mechanisms in place for them. And as for the recovery process, well, we know there have been some bodies recovered from flooded homes in Grantham, and we know that there may be others in there to be recovered when the waters begin to drop. And we know also that there are cars trapped under the railway bridge at Grantham, and there are fears that there may have been people in there. There's a huge recovery effort and clean-up to be done in this small Queensland town.
Tributaries, and some of the terrain becomes a little more accessible we do expect to have a better idea of just how many of those people remain unaccounted for.
Premier Anna Bligh there. Brisbane's Lord Mayor is warning residents in the capital that the flood here will be worse than the 1974 flood which inundated thousands of homes and businesses. Residents and businesses in low-lying areas have been told to prepare for the worst when the city's flooded river peaks on Thursday, and already many low-lying suburbs are flooded. The council says 9,000 properties will be affected. Residents have been told to consider evacuating their homes or at least packing up their belongings and moving them to higher ground.
It rained all day in Brisbane and the river's still rising. Scenes reminiscent of the 1974 flood which inundated thousands of homes and businesses.
The flood reached a peak of 5.45 metres in 1975. Our current modelling shows that with continued rain into Thursday, we will see the levels of the river reach higher than that.
The Premier says Brisbane is facing its greatest threat and its toughest test in more than 35 years.
Today is very significant. Tomorrow is bad, and Thursday is going to be devastating.
The Mayor says water from the devastated Lockyer Valley combined with releases from Wivenhoe Dam, more predicted rain and a very high tide spells disaster for the city. Almost 15,000 people will be directly affected.
That's 6,500 properties, businesses and homes that should see significant flooding. So, sort of half a metre or more of water, we believe.
Evacuation centres are being set up across the city to house an expected 3,500 people. West End resident Pam Morris has seen it all before.
This is our grandfather clock, which is over 100 years old.
In 1974, she lost almost everything.
It was one layer of bricks away from upstairs then.
Like many in her street, Mrs Morris spent the day packing up her precious possessions and moving them to higher ground.
The lady we rented off, she's had it in the family for a while, and she said in the 74 flood, the water reached the windowsill.
Andre Hickey fears the worst.
If it is quite estimated to be the equivalent of 2 of Sydney Harbour, and I've lived in Sydney, there's a massive water coming our way.
As the waters rose, this car was swamped late this afternoon. Low-lying businesses weren't taking any chances either, sandbagging their properties.
It's come in the building here before. It's a sump pump in here to pump the water out, but we're worried that we won't be able to control it because there'll be too big a volume of water.
Late this afternoon, the waters continued to rise, swamping this cafe, which wasn't living up to its namesake.
Have you seen anything like this before, mate?
Never. Nothing ever like it before.
An ominous sign of things to come.
And reporter James Kelly is at the State Emergency Headquarters in Brisbane. James, what's the very latest on the situation facing Brisbane over the next 2 days?
Good evening, Joe. Well, the Premier, as you've just heard, says that 59 people are still missing in the Lockyer Valley, and there's grave fears for 15 of those. In Brisbane alone, the package there said there was 6,500 homes. It's now been upgraded to 9,000 homes and businesses, which more than likely will have about a metre of water through them come Thursday. I'm here at the emergency centre and it's very busy at the moment, but 30,000 properties will be affected in some way or another. That's water on the lawns or water up under the houses. Now, an evacuation centre has been set up at the RNA Showgrounds in Brisbane. One family, I believe, is there already, and they're expecting many more families to roll up tonight. But the message is from the people here, if you have relatives and friends you can stay with, please go there first, otherwise go to the evacuation centre.
Okay, James Kelly at the SES headquarters in Brisbane, thank you.
Yes, we definitely did. We had a generator, so you just needed an extension cord and you could, plug in the TV or just something to watch a movie. Yeah, charge your laptop, I don't think I had a phone at the time, but yeah, definitely charge a computer or something. So that was, I think, just a lot of board games. even though you were very bored.
So it's kind of like a mini COVID?
Yes, exactly. I definitely heard about the helicopters, like dropping off food, because, yeah, Bellbarry.
I'm not sure. Was it like, I think it was at least 2 weeks, probably more. Maybe up to like 3 or 4 weeks, because it was during the holidays. The only real thing I remember was just being hungry all the time because we couldn't get access to food.
I know, and my memory is quite hazy about that time because I was still quite young. I know I got cut off from my house, so I had to stay at my grandmother's house instead. But I don't think we were cut off from food or any other services, so I think we were pretty well off.
So when the floods actually hit, we were at the Sunshine Coast. So my dad was home alone when that happened, and we're quite lucky that we live on a very big hill, so if our house flooded, then the world would actually be ending. But it was quite scary seeing on the TV what was happening, and we couldn't do anything. But I think for me, one of the most memorable things about the floods is how afterwards everyone, even if you didn't know them, they would help clean out their houses and clean up everything. I mean, my dad's wallet did get stolen, which was kind of, you know... It's not good. No, but, you know, it was just, like, even like with the bushfires, how everyone just came together and they were all there to do one thing, which was help everyone, so yeah.
Yes, I remember distinctly Moggle Road at Chapel Hill. The water came up from the river, and it also came down from the heights of Chapel Hill down on, and it all sort of met around the Shell service station, and it came across the road there. So I certainly was cut off, and I just remember the incredible community spirit that sort of transpired, and we see that in any of these natural disasters where people come together to help. Yeah.
Yes, the Mud Army was.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did. I actually took my 2 girls to go to, I think it was the local shopping centre for coffee, and on our way back, the road had flooded over, and so we couldn't cross. We were stranded at my mother-in-law's for it might have been about 4.5 days, and it was a very, very long 4.5 days. My husband, however, was back in our beautiful home. I had shopped the day before, so he had a full fridge, he had multiple bottles of beer, had electricity, and he didn't have to work. So I really begrudge the fact that I was stressed with both kids elsewhere. But the worst thing that happened was, I think it was on day 2, Grandy and Grandad basically used to shop on a daily basis, so they didn't really have enough food to cater for 2 young girls and myself. So I volunteered to go over to Coles, which is just down the road, to pick up some extras to tide us over. And at that point we had no idea how long the flood would last. So I went into Coles and found people panic buying, and it got to the point where we actually had a riot, and the police were called in, and they actually locked us all inside Coles, and the police came and took people away. So I saw a very awful side of Brisbane that day, which I've never seen people panic like that, and considering it was only day 2 and most people in Brisbane still had access, I was very surprised.
Yes, I was stranded for 3 days, all by myself, with my 2 cats. But in honesty, it was for me it was a wonderful three days. I had a full I had a full fridge. I had a full beer fridge. The family were cut off on the other side of the river. Absolutely brilliant.
But you still miss them.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yes, I wasn't able to go home for a couple of days. I had to stay with my grandma. Oh, didn't feel like anything changed at all. The worst part was my grandma didn't have internet. That was my suffering. There was the SES who helped everyone with sandbags around their homes, but that didn't personally affect me.
So we lived on an island for about 5 days or so. So we were fully surrounded by water. We had rescue boats pull up to our deck. My brother even tried fishing off of our deck. We were on our own little island with the water right up to where we lived. Both of our cars got lost to the floods. All of our gas bottles, because our house runs on gas as a cooking, all of them floated around and floated away a little bit. We watched houses go down the river and huge torrents of water. And then once all the water finally went away, I remember walking on the golf course with all of the huge upturned trees that used to be there, like huge gum trees and things, where the actual trunk was larger than me, and it was very surreal walking through a wasteland where everything was covered in like a thin film, not quite soot, but just like sediment left over from the river. And it was very surreal walking on a path that we used to walk every day with our dog, but now it looked like after a nuclear fallout. It was very wild.
Yeah, definitely. I remember seeing all the SES workers and just the community and neighbours helping out. I remember my grandparents would go down there and my dad would help from the other side because he was at home at the time. And yeah, it was a really amazing response to the tragedy.
Well, I wouldn't put it down to. I just see it as a complete community. You know, yeah, I wouldn't single anyone out.
Yes, and he received a certificate for it.
The police. I mean, I've never seen such grace under pressure. In that cold, they calmed everybody down. They took away the perpetrators. But apart from that, of course, there was the SES, who were amazing. I volunteered for day 3 and day 4 in the library at Kenmore, where the Brisbane City Council came out and they actually offered up the meeting room for people to have makeshift beds in. And I spent a couple of days actually volunteering there, so I was very impressed with the Brisbane City Council.
Oh yeah, look, following on in particularly the clean-up, as I mentioned earlier, going out on that first weekend after the waters had receded with the mud army, and just to see the absolutely thousands and thousands of people either cleaning up those who'd been affected, the people who were there providing sandwiches and drinks for the residents or the clean-up crew, the way that the whole town, city came together post that event was absolutely remarkable.
I believe you even received a certificate from the Lord Mayor at the time.
Oh yes, along with all the other participants, yes.
I think the media covered it really, really well. That was the clean-up crew, so the Mud Army. But there were so many different organisations that got together and, took up donations for people who were cut off. There were food drops done by helicopter. There were rescues done by the helicopters. I think a lot of the community just got together and really helped each other out in that sort of time.
Just the SES. Really, they just came around, and because we had nowhere to talk to anyone or really contact many people, but the SES was there in their boats pulling up to our deck and making sure that everything was okay. And I know they...
Did they airdrop food like they did to Bilbao?
They did that up to the school around the corner from us, but we couldn't get there. But fortunately we had plenty of food because we had a deep freezer, and so as things thawed out we just put them in the barbecue and worked our way through it. But they were very good, but didn't really do much for us. I know we had ladders ready to put on the roof for when the water got too high, so we had something to hold on to in case we got trapped there. Yeah, it was pretty wild.
I would think maybe just whenever I drive past the schools, like Montessori especially, I think that's where the most nostalgia probably hits for me, where I'm just, when I'm driving around and stuff.
Probably the valley. Going to the valley was sort of a turning point where I changed from a child into an adult. It really was a rite of passage for me, just to see like city life, which I hadn't seen before.
Probably like South Bank and that kind of area, because a lot of memories for a lot of people happen there. So, yeah.
Probably some of those early nightclubs. Yeah, I think they had a pretty big impact on my life and the social scene. And some of those lovely memories and the people. It's all about the people, and a lot of those people aren't here anymore. So it's nice to have those memories.
I probably have to say South Bank, because a lot of things have happened at South Bank. The arts complex, the museums. I'm into the paranormal world, so I've done an awful lot of ghost hunts in South Bank. I've interviewed an awful lot of people there. I've had dinner with every friend. I've caught the ferry from there. I've crossed the Goodwill Bridge. I've walked across. I've walked up and down. And of course Expo 88 was huge culturally changing. It really was a cultural shift for Brisbane. So, and I arrived in 82, so it basically woke me up to a social life. So as far as I'm concerned, probably South Bank's been pivotal. Yes, and that's the one I've been the most nostalgic about.
As a general thing, probably the river. So not no one particular place, but the things that attach and are by the river, because I spent so much time growing up either in the river or in places beside it, in the parklands and those areas that are beside the river. So probably just the Brisbane River itself.
I guess the places we've had the most family celebrations, so New Farm Park, yes. South Bank, yes. The places that bring up the family memories for me.
Probably South Bank, just purely because whenever me and my family would go out for dinner or for an event, we'd go to South Bank to start or finish it, either just for dinner beforehand or afterwards. That's where it always started and ended for us.